After a significant hiatus, I'm writing fiction again. I feel weird being proud of sharing that with you. Kind of like a kid with a macaroni glitter project, all, look what I made. But it's a big deal for me. I've said many times on this show the easiest thing in the world to do is not write. Even more intriguing, instead of returning to short stories, I have decided to push ahead on the first draft of my novel. After all, why carry a rock when you can push a boulder? Where in the past I might have felt intimidated or overwhelmed by the labor of writing a whole book, now I'm energized to do it. What changed my attitude, you might ask? Well, believe it or not, this show, I'm finally listening to our own advice. See, for the longest time, I thought I needed the whole story, beginning to end, in my head before starting to write. As a novice, I enjoyed some early success following this formula. I would envision a story from start to finish, then sequester myself from the world to write that story. And even though I wasn't sure which words would appear in which order, I pretty much knew everything that needed to happen before I typed a single word. But without inspiration from the muse, I couldn't write it. On closer reflection, I see now that my early success depended on memory and inspiration. Professional writers will tell you that is unsustainable. Maybe you can get a few stories published, which I did, but for longer works to establish a writing career, good luck. I found myself getting jammed up with the constant refrain of, I don't know what's next. I was defaulting to shorter and shorter pieces. Soon I was only able to write fragments. Without meaning to, I was making the work harder, so I stopped. If you've heard the show before, you know that my favorite part of writing is the act of discovery. Back then, my discovery was in the story's language, the quality of the prose, the way I would turn a phrase. But more and more, I saw that my artful prose was unable to sustain the weight of a story. The rigid process I set for myself was altering the form of my stories, like growing a watermelon inside a glass bottle. By working with Tim on this podcast, I would hear us offer very clever advice that I wanted to take. And yet I kept making excuses. I stubbornly rationalized, sticking with an older, clearly failing process when the better way to approach the work was talking back at me, weakly, often in my own voice. So, I am now going to show you my macaroni glitter project. Ready? What I'm doing now, I don't call writing. I call it drafting. Yes, it is a silly semantic distinction, only intended for first drafts, but I swear, it has lifted away my fear and doubt like a cartoon stain from a shirt. I changed my internal narrative, reframed why I am doing what I'm doing, and poof, it became fun again. Here are my 7 ground rules for my drafting process. Number 1, I block 1 hour a day to write, and however much comes out is what comes out. Number 2, I don't stress about the word count because whatever I write, that is more than I had yesterday. I succeed immediately by merely typing the first sentence. This takes the pressure off me and spotlights creativity over page count, quality over quantity. Number 3, I do not criticize the words that come out in these writing sessions. I accept that the final version of the work will be better, so I don't hold myself to Hemingway's published text as the bar to clear on my first draft. This opens a valve of creativity, permitting me to free associate and make unexpected, often delightful connections between actions and characters. Number 4, I do not line edit what I have drafted before. By looking backward and tinkering with language, I risk losing the forward momentum of the story. Editing is its own stage, unique and distinct from drafting. I need a complete narrative before I can go back and start editing. Number 5, I do not write in sequence. Whatever I'm interested in is what I draft, leading to more productive working sessions overall. Remember, this is the first rough draft, so I need to spend all my energy pushing the narrative forward and discovering new things. Number 6, I do draft on my Tandy 1000 TL. The psychological trick of creating new fiction on a dinosaur computer helps me reject a gem-like preciousness of each word. The method of input is imperfect, so the output can be just as imperfect. All of this dupes me into focusing on character and action rather than prose quality. I also love the way the fan whirs in the old machine. It sounds like my childhood, and I find that soothing. Number 7, I do organize what I have drafted once per week. Each drafting session is its own file. When I reconcile the work, it forces me to open each one, read it closely, and decide where in the main novel document it should go. By reading the session output closely, I can spot things that may need more detail later, identify missing scenes I can draft another day, and keep pushing towards a finished narrative. Like always, please steal any process steps you want to try and discard the rest. As you examine your process, especially if you're stuck in a rut creatively, figure out ways to trick your brain into being less critical, more open to unplanned connections, and always advancing towards a complete narrative. Then, build a process that makes the work easier and more fun for you. See you next week. Start writing.